Across history, 7 distinct empires have meticulously honed their own unique methods of inflicting harm upon the male body. Tonight, within the dim, opulent confines of a Byzantine chamber, a 10-year-old boy is on the cusp of encountering the first of these harrowing experiences. Oil lamps flicker against the damp, ancient stone walls, casting grotesque shadows of the men who hold him down. The grim metallic scrape of surgical instruments against a tray pierces through the feeble whimpers that escape him. These are not enemy soldiers preparing unimaginable torment for a prisoner of war. Rather, they are officials of the imperial court. The trembling child is the son of a minor Byzantine noble who, for a mere 30 gold coins, has sold him into the treacherous depths of the imperial court. As the boy's small fingers grip the wooden table anxiously, the court physician approaches wielding a gleaming knife. Promises of glory and a life of influence within the emperor's inner circle have been dangled before him by his uncle. Yet no one has bothered to explain the steep price demanded by such power. The blade gleams in the flickering lamplight, and in the darkness beyond the chamber door, other boys await their fateful turn. In the Byzantine Empire, the practice of castration is not cloaked in secrecy. It is institutionalized policy. The empire requires eunuchs to effectively administer its bureaucracy, guard its women, and manage its treasure. Over centuries, they have transformed this act into a grisly procedure disguised as something approaching medical care. Almost with a steady hand, the physician will accomplish the task in under 60 seconds. Should the boy manage to survive the perilous blood loss, infection, and shock, he will awaken to a new reality, suspended eternally between the worlds of man and woman. Yet amid this devastating loss lies a glimmer of potential. This very boy might someday whisper counsel into the emperor's ear, wield command over armies, and amass wealth that would render his father's paltry 30 coins insignificant. This raises a haunting question. How has such mutilation become the very foundation of empires? Why have civilizations across the globe devised this same horrific answer to a common political quandary? To grasp this dark reality, we must journey back to a time preceding this Byzantine midnight, before the blade, and the screams to an era when systematic castration emerged, driven by the deepest human fears surrounding power, loyalty, and control. In Constantinople, the solitary client of the knife maker was the palace itself, and his singular product was a blade measuring precisely 4 inches long, slightly curved at the tip, honed to slice through flesh with devastating efficiency. Crafted in batches of 12, the knives were carefully wrapped in silk and delivered to the same ironclad door beneath the Grand Palace every 3 months. The guards who received these weapons remained eerily silent, encapsulating a grim understanding of their purpose that required no words. Down in the cutting rooms, the court physician arranged his tools as meticulously as a jeweler, laying out bronze forceps, silver clamps, the knife, a brazier glowing with coals, and clay pots filled with boiling oil. With over 300 procedures performed, he had only lost 47 patients, a remarkable statistic in the 9th century. The secret to his success lay in speed. Perform the incision swiftly, cauterize immediately, and transport the boy to the recovery chamber before shock could fully set in. The distinction between Byzantine castration and the crude mutilation of the battlefield hinges on a single word: system. When Bulgar warriors captured Byzantine soldiers, the process was brutal and haphazard. They hacked indiscriminately with whatever blade was within reach, leaving their victims to suffer and bleed out in the dirt. Conversely, within the confines of Constantinople, castration had evolved into a procedure that, while still barbaric, possessed an air of surgical civility. The physician, well versed in his craft, understood precisely where to cut, how deep to go, and at what angle to minimize blood loss. He knew the importance of packing the wound with salt and wine. Years of experience had taught him which boys would endure and which ones would succumb despite his best efforts. The actual procedure would take a mere 57 seconds. The physician's assistant would restrain the boy's legs, while 2 palace guards held his arms down firmly. There would be no anesthetic. Their prior attempts with opium had resulted in increased bleeding. Instead, they preferred to let the pain induce natural shock. In 2 swift movements, the physician would sever the testicles, pulling them down and cutting through the cords, followed by slicing the penis at its base. Both severed body parts would fall into a bronze bowl with a haunting, wet thud that would reverberate in the nightmares of every eunuch for the rest of their lives. Blood would spurt forth rhythmically, marking a critical moment in the procedure. Already, the assistant had a heated iron rod glowing orange in the brazier. He pressed it against the wound as the chamber filled with the acrid scent of burning flesh. The boy's scream was abruptly stifled, his body convulsing violently. Some would vomit, others would lose consciousness, and those fortunate enough to escape the agony might do both. Once stability returned, the physician would wrap the wound in silk bandages soaked in honey and wine. Inserting a bronze tube where the penis had been, without this tube, the urethra would seal shut, sealing the boy's fate within days. They would carry him to the recovery chamber, a stark stone room filled with straw mattresses, where 20 other boys lay languishing in various stages of healing or death. Families remained oblivious to the grim statistics. 1 in 4 boys would die within the first week, the majority succumbing to infections. The wounds turning black with rot would spark fever, causing them to thrash about on their straw beds, calling for the mothers who had sold them for gold. Another 1 in 10 would die in the subsequent week from complications. Blocked urine, blood poisoning, or sheer despair. The survivors would endure months of suffering as they adjusted to their disfigured lives. Learning to coexist with the bronze tube that was now a part of their bodies, removed only for cleaning. Their voices would change in an unusual manner, not mimicking the normal break of adolescence, but ascending into an ethereal soprano that would forever mark them as different. The Ottoman Empire would refine the Byzantine approach with remarkable efficiency, establishing castration centers in provincial capitals such as Samarkand, Cairo, and Basra for the processing of captured boys before transporting them to Constantinople or Baghdad. The Ottoman method introduced partial castration, removing only the testicles while preserving the penis intact. This allowed these boys to urinate naturally while maintaining sterility, rendering them ideal for guarding harems. Ottoman surgeons employed a more merciful technique: substitute cutting with a silk cord tied around the scrotum, constricting it relentlessly until circulation ceased. The testicles would darken and fall off within a week. They argued that their method was cleaner and more humane, though those suffering within. Ottoman castration centers might have debated the point. Their voices were not considered when they had become mere commodities, future guards administrators, and faithful servants. Living reminders that in empires built on absolute power, even the bodies of children became state property. The agony endured would last precisely 7 minutes, and they were meticulous about timing. From the first cut to the final cauterization, a mere 7 minutes. Yet within that brief span, the whole boy would be transformed into a tool the empire could exploit. What began as surgical precision quickly morphed into a bureaucratic process, literally turning butchery into a facet of governance. However, practicality wasn't the only ambition at play. Several empires sought to weave their brutal practices into grand spectacles designed for public consumption. They craved the gasps and astonished reactions from the crowd, creating moments so horrific that they were etched into the memories of the populace, fostering obedience through fear. The methods employed in Hungary's public squares starkly illustrated the contrasts of such procedures, rendering the calculated Byzantine surgeries nearly compassionate in comparison. In Budapest, May of 1514, would herald a moment when the rebel leader, Jogadoza, stood trial in a uniquely horrific fashion. Following a revolt led against the Hungarian nobility, Doza would now learn the depths to which the authorities would plunge to reclaim the natural order disrupted by his insurrection. The executioners crafted a special throne for him, an iron seat heated beneath him until it glowed a dull red. A crown of white-hot metal awaited him, but first, they had more harrowing plans in store for his body. The crowd, having abandoned their daily routines, pressed eagerly toward the scaffold. Merchants closed their shops to witness this grim spectacle. Mothers hoisted their children onto their shoulders for a better view. This was not merely an execution, this was a performance. As the executioner pumped the bellows, sparks leapt into the skies, while the heated pincers rested within the coals, shimmering ominously. Doza stood naked upon the platform, his hands secured behind his back, flanked by 6 of his vanquished lieutenants, weakened by starvation. Promises of a nourishing reward hung in the air for them. It would be a chance to reclaim dignity by consuming the very flesh of their leader. Doza's scream shattered the quiet of the afternoon as the pincers clamped down on him, sending flocks of pigeons fleeing from nearby church towers. The grotesque mingling of burning flesh and other twisted scents filled the air, a blend that could elicit even the strongest soldiers retching. The cruel axe stretched out agonizingly in full view of the assembled crowd. Each round of repeated torment elicited a rising anticipation among spectators. The crowd was initially entertained, caught in a macabre dance of cruelty. But, with each violent application of the pincers, the atmosphere morphed. Laughter faded as discomfort settled in. The audience began to realize they had crossed an invisible boundary. Populating the blurring lines of justice and sadism, they grappled with the grotesque evolution of the spectacle before them. As Doza hung limply, they needed him to remain conscious for what came next. The authorities had guaranteed his lieutenants their lives in exchange for a perverse reward: consume the flesh of their fallen commander or share his fate on the platform. The executioner carefully extracted a piece of burned tissue, holding it aloft for all to see. What unfolded next shocked even the executioners. The crowd, once bloodthirsty and eager for carnage, began to turn against the spectacle of sadism. The laughter evaporated, replaced by a muddled cacophony of horror, as the remaining lieutenants grappled with their choice. Some, desperate for survival, acted immediately. Others hesitated, caught in a moral conflict. A lieutenant who refused met with an executioner's crossbow bolt, hurled from the platform and met with an eerie silence from the once eager crowd. They had witnessed more than a gruesome punishment. They had become unwitting participants in a collective nightmare that forced a reckoning with the nature of their rulers. The Hungarian nobles had intended to make Doza a clear example of the cost of rebellion. In their bloodlust, they fostered a deeper connection among the populace. The story of his torture traveled far beyond the city, transforming his narrative from that of a mere rebel to one of martyrdom. Tales of his endurance would spread across Europe, painting him as a valiant figure feared so deeply that they resorted to public dismemberment to silence him. This evolution in the public perception of such events marked a turning point. Other kingdoms began to take heed, realizing that public castration, as a tool of intimidation, required careful balance. Too little violence would elicit no fear, while too much violence would ignite sympathy and an alarming prospect for those wielding power. The Byzantine practices kept their sacrificial displays concealed in the palace basements, while the Ottomans maintained their depersonalized approach in distant regions. However, the various kingdoms in Europe learned that the allure of public punishment proved too tantalizing to resist. From London to Prague, town squares soon mirrored the same horrifying scenes. Captured enemies, political dissidents, and convicted criminals faced instruments of pain and humiliation as onlookers gathered to witness their punishment. Executioners evolved these cruel methods into an art of spectacle. The pursuit of creativity spawned new devices, spring-loaded mechanisms, capable of delivering multifaceted torment in an instant, heated metal cups that cauterized flesh as they cut, and intricate mechanical contraptions that allowed the public to engage by turning handles to assist in the mutilation. The line between innovation and torture blurred, but beneath it all lay a thoroughly entrenched bureaucracy. Cities began to appoint official castrators, establishing fee schedules alongside their services. 2 florins for a basic cut, 5 for the burning technique, and a far steeper charge for the full display with multiple instruments. Licenses were issued. Taxes were collected on revenue garnered by mutilation, became a standard municipal service, reduced to an item on a city budget. Venice maintained a public castrator on salary, operating a workshop nestled between the market and the customs house, a place signified by a visible sign depicting a knife against flames. Castration could also serve private motives. For 15 ducats, a husband could reclaim his honor by having his wife's lover punished publicly. Records from these trades remain intact: ledger entries, chronicling names and dates, brimming with records of agony reduced to mere transactions. Giovanni the merchant, castrated for defaulting on loans. Paolo, the thief, punished with burning pincers for his transgressions against the church. Marco, a soldier mutilated for desertion. Line after line, a ruthless catalog reflecting humanity's suffering reduced to accounting terms. Some victims of these public displays survived, emerging as living warnings, begging in the streets with their mutilated bodies on display. Others found refuge within the church, where they're unique. High-pitched vocal capabilities, products of the very mutilation that condemned them, transformed them into choir singers and scribes of considerable value. The pinnacle of this grotesque theater arrived with the public castration of a man named Juire in 1562. Accused of plotting against the French crown, Juire faced execution in full view of Paris Square. Yet, as a man of nobility, the spectacle surrounding his punishment was destined to capture the attention of all Europe. As his story bursts forth, we confront the terrifying truth that threads through empires and civilizations alike: the power dynamics around both governance and obedience, and the horrific price many have paid to shape the fabric of societal control. The horrors of man, enduring through time, leave an indelible mark upon the annals of history. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to support our work and never miss an upload. Like this video, drop a comment, and share it with others to show your support and help us grow this historical community.